Typically, I get asked a lot of questions about how to grow vegetables in containers or in raised beds or in some sort of fixed situation. If you have questions about that, please raise your hand and ask. We can go over that because there's some things that are a little bit different than going in the ground versus in a container, okay? But I'm going to just walk you through to start. Does everybody recognize and realize that there are cool season vegetables and warm season vegetables? Yes? So this is cool season vegetable time. I put a kind of a melee of them here so you can kind of take a look. But things like your greens, Swiss chard, spinach, lettuces, any of those types of things, peas. I have bok choy up here. I have, what else? Kale up here. So any broccoli rabe, cauliflower, any of those types of things are cool season. And a vast majority of your herbs are indeed cool season. So if you are an herb gardener and really want to jump in on the herb season and get some real growth out of things prior to the heat, which will stunt everybody's business for a little while, then herbs are a good way to get, there's plenty of them that you can start. Obviously, the warm season stuff like basil, lemongrass, dill, those things need to be inside, maybe go outside during a nice day like today. Let everything get to see a little bit of our weather, right? So if you decided that you wanted to grab tomatoes to give them a little boost before you throw them in the ground next month, or if you're going to use a wall of water, great. But if you're going to get them, put them outside. They need to see the wind, they need to see the sun, they need to see a little cold but not a frost, because they're gonna get it. We live in a place where the weather is kind of a challenge. So not only the weather, the soil, everything about everything. And I love, love, love New Mexico. I'm born and raised in Vermont. I moved out here when I was in my early 20s. I've been an avid gardener all of my life. My grandmother, when we were children, my grandmother lived with us. Our vegetable garden in Vermont was 1.5 acres of just vegetables. We canned everything. We lived the homesteader life in Vermont, so which is not an easy life to live in Vermont, to be honest. But so I love New Mexico. It's just there's a lot of challenges, and I think that the realization that when the summer heat comes and your plants are doing everything to survive, it's not to thrive, it's to survive, then you have to recognize that and deal with that problem or that situation with a good solution, which is typically food, okay? So, there's different stages of feedings that happen in your vegetables, just like when you are small to when you are an adult, or just when you're gonna run a marathon versus walking around the block. There's very different needs that plants have at different stages of their life. I personally feed almost entirely organic or all natural. There are lots of fertilizers that are derived from organic materials that are not listed as OMRI certified or what have you. To me, if they've got organic ingredients in them, it's good enough for me, okay? I don't need to have the stamp, and if you do, that's a little bit harder to find. They're out there, but I think that not to get political, but the whole organic thing has become very politicized and just a money maker instead of it actually being what's there for us, right? What's best for us. So anyway, off that, we're going to get off that. So I'm going to just walk you through my personal situation that I use on a regular basis with my vegetables at home. Now I'm pulling up the granules or the dries because I don't have time in my life to use a liquid every week or two. If you're retired and you have that time, God bless you. Good for you. I don't. So I use a mixture because each of these has a little something different in it that is good for plant material. Whether it's tomatoes or peppers or any of your cucurbits, which are all your things like zucchinis, cucumbers, squash, that sort of thing. So all of these have things that are a little bit different. These two products specifically, I'm a big fan. So the tomato and veg has calcium in it. And we use calcium as an aid. It is not the only answer, but it's an aid in minimizing blossom end rot in your tomatoes and peppers, or any of your nightshades, really, because you can actually get something similar in a potato underground. Okay, so I use this product for that purpose because it's got that in it. Okay, I like this product because I like the fact that we have a high middle number, which is 9 on this, which is for bloom and fruit production. In a natural, so natural numbers are basically going to be from 12 and down. Okay, when you start to get above 12 in your NPK, typically that's a non-organic. Okay, these guys, very similar products, a little bit different reality in these products. You can see the middle number on both of these is 12. Okay, this is a phosphorus. The middle number is phosphorus, so that's your bloom and fruit production. I do a mixture. I actually typically take the bone meal mixed with these guys. I put them in a bucket, I mix it really well, and I throw it in my raised beds once a month because that's what I have time for. Okay, if we're out of this, which sometimes happens, I will sub this. This is definitely a little more aggressive because bat guano, which is what this cabin culture is bat guano, okay? It does have some heat to it potentially. Now, these have been bagged for a while. I'm not necessarily worried about burning, so to speak, but you definitely would want, for what I do with this is I mix these all in a bucket. Does it tell you to do that on these bags? No. It does not. Am I going off label? I am. Don't bust me. But this is the quickest, easiest way that I can do it for myself. I don't have time to fiddle fart around with a teaspoon or a cup, or I just don't have time for that. So this is how I do this. If I'm using something like this, which I don't use on my vegetables, but I can show you, this is something you want to measure very specifically and follow the directions, okay? Some of these organic things I tend to be a little bit more loose with because I feel like we can. This guy is an excellent, excellent food, just general food. Is it low nitrogen? Yes. So again, we're looking at the places in time where your plants need to help lift and produce fruit and flower, or flower first and fruit. So this is just an excellent, excellent situation for, let's say you're getting starts and your starts already have some buds on them or some flowers on them. You actually want to mix this in the soil when you plant this one right here, because it actually will provide something right away for the plant to utilize for the fruit and flower that it's already got on it, okay, especially when you're dealing again with starts, okay. But as a general rule for me, I use a mixture of these guys, and the fruit and flower has magnesium in it. Your plants need magnesium here. It is one of the things that is typically very low in our, we have very minerally soil and water here, but it tends to be a lot of iron and salts that are a problem. And it depends on where you are with the iron, because we do have iron deficiency problems here, but we have places where there is huge iron buildup. So it really kind of depends on, you know, your yard, and not everybody is going to know their yard. I can tell you right now that there is probably not one person in here that has native soil that is below a 7.5-ish. Okay, the likelihood of that is extremely low. I don't even care if you've been growing alfalfa on your yard, in your field for a year. That's just not going to change things enough. So we have poor soil here, so we want to make up for the fact of that with food, okay? And with soil amendments. If you're doing direct planting in the ground here as opposed to raised beds or containers, which I got to tell you, your life will change with raised beds. Your life will change 100% with raised beds, especially vegetable gardening. And I don't care if you build them out of straw bales and fill the middle. I don't care if you are handy dandy and you can zip, zip, zip some wood and make something mean and dirty and just throw it in the yard somewhere and fill it with good soil. Your life is going to change with raised beds. Our soil eats away at any kind of nutrient that you put in it, so therefore it tends to be a challenge unless you have been working your soil for years and years and years and years. And there are some products that we recommend, especially for folks on the west side, because you have the added challenge of having basically beach sand. Okay, you know, there's no consistency to that soil for the most part. Yes, there are some places 18 inches down that might have some clay or caliche of some kind in it out there, but for the most part, it's beach sand out there. So my suggestion is always back to earth compost, because it's acidified. They add elemental sulfur to that product, and pecan shell mulch as a soil additive, not as a mulch. So pecan shell mulch is naturally acidic. It sits at about a 5. It breaks down extremely slowly. And our soils, like I said, they eat away at the nutrients that we are providing for our plants. So you have to really understand that a one and done is never going to work. It is an ongoing, it is every day, every year without fail, some sort of soil additive. Because if you don't, 2 years down the line, you're going to be stuck with what would be real crap soil again. Okay, so but the pecan shell mulch, for those of you who are on the west side, is game changer. Absolute game changer. Yes, it holds moisture and all that kind of thing, but it actually breaks down very, very slowly. It helps break down other composts so that you have something that is below surface that is active. Our soils really have little to no anything good. you know, mycorrhizae, any of that kind of thing, that is, you have to work at that here, and or you create it above ground. Okay, all of these products from Fox Farm have mycorrhizae in them in some form or another. The liquids, you do indeed need to shake these. These are all natural products. All the good stuff settles to the bottom of these bottles. So it's very important that when you get onto feeding with this kind of stuff, that you really shake your products up, because you're going to lose the benefits of what's in this by it sinking to the bottom. These products right here, I don't know if there's any cannabis growers in here, but this is also a really great formula for that too. This guy right here, the Big Bloom, this is kind of an all-purpose. This is actually the only OMRI certified liquid from Fox Farm. Okay, so this is very low numbers. It's very it is a general fertilizer. The intention of this product, so I always encourage that somebody gets the large size of this to combine with these. Okay, so these are meant to be used together. This is Grow Big. This is for green growth. So your brand new plants that just go in the ground, green growth. So if you're looking for getting sizable plants and getting some growth out of your plants, you're wanting to use these two things together. If you're going in the ground, you probably need to do this about once a week. You can stretch it a little. Honestly, you could do this every 3 to 5 days if you wanted to. I don't recommend that, because you'd be blowing through this stuff like crazy. Okay, I think you can try to get away with once a week. In a container, every week to 10 days with this for green growth. Okay, when you start to see bud production, you want to change to the tiger bloom. Tiger bloom is fruit and flower production. Again, the intention is for these two to be used together because this is an all-purpose. This has a lot more well-rounded things in it than just this by itself. Same with this guy, okay? So these can be used together when you start to get fruit and flower production. And what I would say is when we get to the heat of summer, when it's hotter than blazes, and we all worry about what we're gonna potentially feed, liquids or these granulars are safe enough to use during the summer months when it's hot. What I would say is if your plants do not have flowers on them, which the best thing to look for is tomatoes, because tomatoes in the heat of summer are gonna peter out. It's just too hot, okay? They may try to produce some blooms, but it's too hot for them to set the fruit. And in which case, I would encourage that you just pick one of these, just pick one, and just feed gently once a month. You got 2 months of hot, hot, blazing hot, okay? So keep it simple, okay? And then when you start to see production again, you can add the other products in because, oops, jumper, because then you're feeding the plant what they need when they need it, and you're not just willy-nilly feeding them whatever. Okay. The other thing that I would throw out about this guy and this guy, these are excellent for herbs. You don't want to encourage flower on herbs. So you don't want to, yes ma'am. These are grow big and big bloom. Okay. You don't want to encourage flower on herbs. What do we do with basil? We cut all the flowers off so you keep the plant nice and big and full. So you don't want to encourage flower growth on your herbs. So this is what you want for your herbs if you're going to keep it au naturel. Or what I use at home is fish fertilizer. It's relatively high in nitrogen. It's au naturel. I keep most of my herbs in containers of some kind or another just to keep dogs out of them, peacocks out of them, whatever we have roaming around the yard, chickens, whatever. This is a great way to go. Simple to use. Mix it in a watering can or a bucket. Keep it easy. Yes, ma'am. I'll be right there.
So the bags of the Happy Frog, and when you mix them, is it equal parts?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I just dump literally a bag of each in a big bucket and mix it.
Okay.
Just a suggestion to keep cats out of your beds. When we lived in Florida, I took a 4 to 6 inch strip of cayenne pepper, and you used to be able to buy a humongous thing of it at Costco. Don't know if you can anymore. But at any rate, you keep it far enough away from the plants so it doesn't burn your plants. But if you put that all the way around the border, they walk through it and lick their paws and they go nuts. So, I mean, it doesn't hurt them.
Sure.
They just don't like it.
Sure.
So,
sure. If you had luck with that, that's great.
It works great.
Yeah. The other thing that I've seen people use on raised beds for cats specifically are the pigeon strips. It's not super pretty, but it's spiky and tends to maybe send them away. So the question is, what do you do if you've moved maybe to a new house and you're unsure what somebody has done with that soil? The unfortunate thing is if you are thinking that you're going to go get it tested for something, you can. It's a process that probably would take longer than just leaching that stuff out of there. You can do that with water. You know, just leach it out. Keep the area watered and leach that stuff out of there. That's typically the easiest way to handle that situation. You're never going to probably be able to dig out an entire area of something. I mean, I don't know what kind of situation you're, in, but I would say the easiest answer initially is if you're worried, I would just start leaching those areas out. You can use gypsum. Gypsum helps pull things through the soil. Gypsum is great for a lot of different things. Gypsum actually, if those of you who might be in the valley potentially that have clay soil, the pelletized gypsum specifically is fantastic for creating pockets through the clay and help disperse water and air through the clay by creating these pockets. So that's a big plus for gypsum. And it's just a decent additive for clay-based soils in general because it helps break up the composition of clay over time. So that can be a plus. The question is, how do you apply gypsum? I do have a pelletized bag, so it's just putting it down with a spreader and watering it in, just like you would any other fertilizer. Yeah. So I do have some synthetics here. If you are the Miracle Grow type or what have you, which is fine. These are our blends that we have made here in Portales. This company has been in business for over 50 years, and we just would like to keep the money here in New Mexico as opposed to somewhere else. So the Max Bloom, which I have in a water soluble and a granular. So these are great for production, fruit production. The numbers on this guy are 10, 55, 10. Okay, yeah. So if you do annuals in containers, this is the way to go. It's the only way to keep your annuals blooming all summer long. Period, 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 period. When it gets to be 98 degrees and you're wondering why your plants in your pots aren't looking great at your door, this is probably the reason why. They haven't been fed enough. Okay, I use the granular. I'll get you right 1 second. I use the granular. Again, I don't have time, so I just put the granular in all my annual pots and just live with how that works because I don't have time. What was your question?
What were the name of those?
These guys are Bloom Max. This is by Sure Green. These are Bloom Max. Okay, same product. This is actually kind of a quasi Osmocote. It's a slow release. It lasts for a good long time. It's great. I'm a big fan. I don't necessarily use it with my veggies, but I do use it with my annuals and stuff that I have in pots in my courtyard. She's asking about citrus. I do have a citrus and avocado fertilizer that comes from these guys if you want to use something that's granular. One thing I will put out there with these products, now I have 3 cats of my own, and I'm sure I'm gonna get a lot of hell for this, but my cats go in and out, so they do go outside. I do keep pecan shell mulch in my beds, and they don't tend to use it as a litter box, which is great. But these products, because of where they're derived from, there's a lot of things like alfalfa meal and fish meal and bone meal and things like that in these products. It does tend to gain the curiosity of some of the critters, so it's something to keep in mind, especially when you have potted things that because you know if they do get in there and do too much digging in a pot, that can be a problem. So what I would encourage is if you're going to use the citrus and avocado fertilizer, for sure put either pine cones in there, which is a great way to keep cats out of your house plants, big old pine cones. And at least they're not ugly, they hold up for a long time. That's a great way, or stone, even if you really want to go that route. But their fertilizer for citrus and avocado are great. It's really great. You can use that same fertilizer on any one of your more houseplant type fruit producing plants. I am getting some avocados in. They are a zone 8 avocado. I would be a little careful putting them outside, okay, even though the zoning map has changed a little bit. I think we all read that maybe, but I don't trust yet. Although I do grow olives. I grow fruiting olives. I grow 2 different varieties at my house. I harvested about 5 quarts of olives last year, and they're currently brining because it takes quite a long time to brine olives. But I have manzanilla olives and abriquina olives at my house, which I have coming in next week. So we might get lucky with this avocado that's coming in. We'll see. But same kind of fertilizer can be used on a lot of those plants. The olives could have that same fertilizer and would really like it. Dragon fruit, if you have dragon fruit plants, would like that citrus and avocado fertilizer. It's just a really good fertilizer for those types of fruit plants or nut plants, even nut trees, if you have nut trees inside as opposed to out. So anyway, that's that. And I wanted to let you know that also when it comes to a lot of your cool season stuff, again, you are not seeking to provide fruit and flower, right? So because I mean, yes, a little bit on your broccolis because that's a flower that's starting on the broccoli that you're harvesting early. But you really, and peas would be the exception because you do want to get some flour out of peas to produce the pea. But a lot of the greens, you really want to feed something that's pretty much only nitrogen. You want to feed the plant the green stuff, green growth stuff, and not necessarily encourage it to go to flower. So that is a very important piece. And honestly, a lot of these cool season heavy leafy stuff like spinach, Swiss chard, certain varieties of kale, if you tuck them in underneath a tomato plant or underneath your pepper plants, I have been very successful with Swiss chard year round, no problem, even out in the sun. I have been very successful. My kale look like trees right now. They are literally like this big. And I at this point, honestly, most of that goes, not most, but a lot of it goes to my chickens. The chickens love it. It's good for them. But I've been very successful keeping leafy kale underneath tomatoes for a vast majority of the summer. The only thing that really does have a hard time is a lot of your lettuces will they just melt when it gets hot. So, and there's really not much you can do about that. So, but you know, it is what it is. But there's a lot of different ways to get you. Right now, you can get 3 months at least out of lettuce, at least, even into the May and in June when it starts to get really hot. She's asking for fertilizer for figs. So for figs, I would also use that citrus and avocado fertilizer. Figs in a pot, good luck, in my opinion. Okay. I think that figs are something that my fig tree is probably not quite as tall as the greenhouse now, but it's been in the ground for 6 or 7 years. And the first 5 years that it was in the ground, I put wire around it and filled the wire with leaves. And it was the only way it was going to survive. And on that 6th year that I did not put the wire and the leaves around it, if we didn't get cold enough that it killed half of it back and it all came up from the ground, which was cool, but it's had to basically start over. So we basically have what I would consider fig shrubs here as opposed to fig trees. And can you do a lot of pruning? You can, to get them kind of like tree shaped with a single trunk. I think that's a whole lot of work that doesn't need to happen, in my opinion. But last year, I had more figs than I knew what to do with. I mean, I had figs every single morning with my coffee. I'd go out, pick figs right off the tree and just eat figs for breakfast. So, and once they start, it's hard to get them to stop, and yay, you know. Same with pomegranates. Pomegranates, I think, are a little testy. The first couple of years they're in the ground. I encourage people to plant those 2 particular plants south face if you can. Give them a little wind protection if you can. Once they get started, they go gangbusters and they get big. I had probably 50 pomegranates on my pomegranate last year. And I literally did not feed my pomegranate at all last year. I just never got around to it. In fact, I fed very little last year. We filled all of our raised beds with soil-loosened soil of a couple of different varieties last year because we wanted to test it. We had amazing gardens last year, amazing production. And the only reason why we didn't have cucurbit production is because the peacocks ate all of it. So every single ounce of a cucurbit they ate. So I need to work on that situation. Yes, ma'am. We used the garden compost in one. We used the premium compost in another. We used 2 or 3 different varieties and filled all of it because we have like 8 beds. So we filled them all with something a little different just to see what was gonna happen. And in all reality, I was too busy to do anything last year but survive my life. So nothing got fed, and they did great. So did you have a question? So she's asking about fertilizing peaches right now. So any of your fruits that are stone fruits, which are typically starting to bud or bloom right now, you have apricots are probably ours are already all flowering out here. So guaranteed we are not going to have apricots probably this year. That's my guess. Anyway, because it's supposed to freeze tonight. So bye-bye fruit. And there is nothing that you can do to change that unless you're going to cover your tree. Okay? There's nothing that you're going to do to feed your trees or whatever to get them to, you don't need to add bees. I mean, now bees are great, but bees are going to do their job. Bees are not the answer to getting something like an apricot. Apricots only fruit basically every 5 to 6 years here because every 5 to 6 years we don't have a late frost. That's it. Frost is the thing. So the fertilizer, I'm getting there. So the fertilizer, you can do one of a couple things if you want to use our 1688, which is by this company. The 1688 is an excellent just all-purpose fertilizer. It's well balanced, it's got sulfur and iron in it, it's just got everything that your plant needs. If you don't want to use a synthetic fertilizer, you can go the way of something like these kind of guys. I can get these in larger bags. I have to special order those, so if you let me know, I can certainly try to special order those. Honestly, the plant knows no different. It's just you and I, right? So this early in the game on a tree, I would encourage you to use the 1688. Your trees would love you for it. Yes, ma'am.
How do you cover a peach tree? I don't have a very big one yet.
Yeah, so there's a couple ways that you can use frost cloth, which we have frost cloth. So frost cloth is it basically gives you about 5 to 7 degrees under the cloth. Okay. If they're calling for a hard freeze, you might consider putting a lamp under there to just give you a little extra. You can use a cotton sheet, like a bed sheet. You cannot use plastic. Okay, the condensation that happens under there will ultimately end up freezing on the plant where it sits, and you'll end up doing a lot of damage. So you don't want to go that route if you can avoid it. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
What is it?
You go ahead. I'll get to her.
What's in soil solution that is the desirable thing to have?
So Soilutions, they're a local company. They're in the South Valley. They do a whole lot of pulling items that would typically get thrown in a dump and creating compost out of them. They have a contract with, say, Sandia Labs for taking all their paper, and they take all their paper products and they compost their paper products. I mean, it's just a laundry list of things that they do. They take a lot of forest floor material. They take cuttings from the city, all the cuttings that the city produces by doing tree cutting and shrub cutting and mowing and all of that. They take all of that and compost it. So a lot of their stuff is what we would call, sustainable or regenerative type composting. So they just have a great process. And if you go down to their yard, or if you go to places like Just Sprinklers that carries their product in bulk, you can see that there's a very clear difference between that and many other soils that you see on the market, to be honest. So ma'am, did you?
Would the bag have the 3 nitrogen?
The compost, you mean? The composts typically are not going to have an NPK number on them. No. Did you have a question?
Our raised beds are filled with solutions, I believe, just the regular compost.
Uh-huh.
When because they sink during the year.
Sure.
To top them off, what would be a good solution to add on top?
So this is a common situation with your raised bed items. So if you have a raised bed, typically you find that you're like, where did all my soil go the next year? So if you're going to do some additive on top, I would do one of a few things. If you want to stay with the Soilutions product, honestly, I would go with whatever you used last year if it worked for you. Do you see what I mean? And then just turn that into the top layer. The other options that I think are always a good way to go, the Fox Farm products that are excellent are their potting soils. Their potting soils are, bar none, some of the best potting soil on the market, and there's a couple of different varieties. Gary, would you grab me the small bags of Ocean Forest and Happy Frog? Ocean Forest and Happy Frog, the Happy Frog comes in a 2 cubic foot. The Ocean Forest comes in a 1.5 cubic foot. There's not a ton of difference, except for the Ocean Forest has a lot of ocean life in it, and it has oyster shell in it, which is calcium. Okay, so again, for vegetables, especially your tomatoes and peppers, the calcium is just a great addition to what's going on. So these guys, again, I can't say enough, because I personally think that these are some of the better products on the market as far as potting soils are concerned. Even if you're just doing your annual plants in pots or what have you, there is something that to be said for the fact that you're using something that's high quality. Okay. They both have mycorrhizae in them. They both have earthworm castings in them. This, like I said, has a lot of sea life type stuff in it. So it does not have a fertilizer added, but it has a 30-day charge, is what we call it. 30 days that you would never have to fertilize, because it's got enough nutrient, even in a container or a raised bed, it has enough nutrient to supply nutrients to your plants for a month, if not more, depending on what you have planted in there. Okay, know that vegetables suck the life out of fertilizer. Okay, they need it. There is no way to get around. I'm actually super surprised, talking about Soilutions. I am super surprised that we got the production that we got last year without feeding. Or at least maybe I fed once. I might have fed once. I can't even remember now. But point being is, in all reality, vegetables suck a ton of fertilizer. Herbs take a ton of fertilizer to look good. So on something like this, if you're feeding your herbs like your basil, your parsley, things like rosemary, lavender, that are woody perennials, they don't need all the things. They don't need all the things. I'm not saying you don't need to fertilize them. They don't want or need anything that's super heavy. Yes, ma'am.
Last year we got all of our squash had squash bugs.
Right.
Is there anything we should do to the soil?
Not plant squash. No, I'm just kidding. She's asking about squash bugs. So I had this conversation with a gentleman earlier. What I did the last few years, and again, I did it last year, but my problem was not squash bugs last year. It was, we live in the North Valley. We have probably about 30 wild peacocks that live in our area, and they for sure, I wonder what they're going to taste like on a spit. Anyway, just kidding. So I plant my cucurbits with enough diatomaceous earth in the hole that you see it. It's white. So I mix enough diatomaceous earth with the soil that I'm backfilling into the area where I have cucurbits of any kind. They don't typically spend as much time on a cucumber, but if they get to the point where there's not enough for them somewhere else, they're going to go there. Okay, so just be prepared, right? So I take the diatomaceous earth and put it in this hole so it is white. The diatomaceous earth is not going to hurt your plant in any way, shape, or form. I also cake it around the crown of the plant when it's really young. And I try, it doesn't work out so well for me every year, but I try to keep the backs of the leaves very well dusted with DE. And what I found is if you do keep it well dusted, like you see it on the back of the leaf, they have a hard time setting the eggs on the leaf, which is the big, and they live in the ground, right? They come up from the ground, they live the winter. They're just a nemesis. That's a nemesis. That's a nemesis that we are never going to get rid of ever, ever, never, ever. So this guy is spinosad. This garden and vegetable dust. I'm pretty sure it's listed for squash bugs. I would mix it with DE. Diatomaceous earth, we used to have Permagard, which I'm so sad that that company stopped making that product. They used a permethrin, which is a natural derivative from a chrysanthemum flower, and they mixed it with the diatomaceous earth, and it was literally the only thing on the market that I knew that really worked. Because the permethrin would ultimately create the DE creates a place, lesions for the insecticide to get in, and that was the reason why it worked so well. The spinosad has a very similar potential, but you have to mix it with something that again creates those lesions, which is the diatomaceous earth, and the diatomaceous earth is not going to hurt you. Yes, ma'am. I'll get
planting marigolds.
I think it looks pretty. And it brings some bees.
Okay, but that will not provide the same protection.
No.
And will diatomaceous earth work for cinch bugs too?
Yeah, you can use DE for the little roly-polies and cinch bug. Yes, ma'am. I'll be right there. I'll get you two.
Be a little proactive here with the aphids. What can I do? Is there anything I can do early when I plant something to keep the aphids off later?
Not really. I mean, can you dust? Yes, you can always dust. You can always dust with DE. And here's the thing: if you dust your plants on the top, like kale is famous for getting aphids, right? So if you plant your kale and dust your kale with DE on the top, just remember that if you overwater like this with your hose and you wash it all off, you have to reapply. So it's a good lesson in trying to get the hose underneath your plant so that you're not just washing off the stuff. Now, the stuff that gets planted in the soil, does it dissipate after a while? Sure. And I just try to keep the stuff caked around the base of the plant. I just try to keep it there because yes, it's ugly, yes, whatever. But once those plants start to grow and they're creating the shade, which is what those bugs want. If you ever notice that you don't have a squash bug until your squash gets to be big enough to produce, because they're actually producing the shade that the bug wants. So you're trying to put the stuff down in a place where you're really not going to see it that much anyway, but as far as you're over the top of things, if you wash it off, you have to reapply, okay?
I grew up in Albuquerque. This is going to sound silly. When we were kids, we had these things called, what we call them, tomato worms.
Uh-huh.
But there wasn't a tomato plant anywhere that I know of.
Mm-hmm.
Are those really related to, a problem for growing tomatoes? Is those worms?
Yes. Oh, yes. Yep. So the sphinx moth is the hummingbird moth is what is your tomato hornworm. So you don't really need the tomato. They are, what I will tell you though, is they are phenomenal pollinators. And they are evening pollinators. So when all of your other pollinators go to bed for the night, they're out doing their job. So it is something to kind of keep in mind that you don't necessarily want to get rid of those moths. You take the good with the bad. You know what I mean? That's just what it is. Yes, ma'am. What do you mean, what do I do with chicken poop? If you want to use chicken manure, you can, but you really need to let that compost for at least a season, at least a year. Yes, because it's very hot. Very hot. It can do a lot of burning damage. Even if you mix it in. Mm-hmm. Yes, ma'am.
What do you do about grasshoppers?
Grasshoppers.
Terrible grasshoppers.
Yes. Yes. So grasshoppers, I'm hoping that we're going to be able to get our hands on Nolo bait. So I'm hoping we'll still be able to get Nolo bait. I do have a spray for it, but it's not friendly. It's definitely, grasshoppers are really difficult. And the big thing about grasshoppers is even Nolo bait has to be used when a grasshopper is a certain size. So you have to catch it at a very early stage. When your grasshoppers start getting over an inch, good luck. You got to spray them. You have to, because otherwise you're not going to get rid of them. Yes, ma'am.
Is there one
I'll get you.
vegetable that doesn't draw bugs?
No. Is there a vegetable that doesn't draw bugs? No. And do you know why? There's a lot of reasons why. So there's a lot of different bugs that are drawn to different plants because bugs are opportunistic. So bugs are going to things that are easy fixings for them, right? It's an easy meal for them. So that's just the crux of that biscuit. I mean, it's just the aphids. We get a little, what are those called? They're like a potato beetle. They're a little beetle that eats the heck out of greens. I mean, they're just opportunistic. They're going for an easy meal. So no. And if it has a flower, it's going to produce or draw something to it. Hopefully more pollinators than not.
Might be a farmer's myth. I have a sister-in-law that gets those squash bugs,
Mm-hmm.
and she gets a bunch of them and she squishes them up as much as she can and adds water and then sprays
Mm-hmm.
her squash with them.
I've been told that.
Does it work?
I don't know.
Okay.
So I've heard that.
Okay.
Yeah, I feed them to my chickens. But there's lots of other ways that you can try to draw them. I actually have had success with soaking a 2x4, section of 2x4, and then propping it up on a rock underneath. And when you get out there in the morning, they're all on the wet 2x4, and then you can take the 2x4 and just step on it, or put it in the chicken coop if you got chickens. Chickens will just hop and skip and love it. But so there's other things like that. I've heard people putting out cans of beer for them. It's similar to a slug or snails or what have you. I don't know if that works, to be honest. I don't do a whole lot of farmer almanac stuff. Yes, sir.
So we do have chickens, and we do let the poop set and dry up, and then mix it with a paddle wheel and break it down.
Mm-hmm.
Is that enough for the whole year when we mend it in the soil with leaves and other things, or is there?
You mean to not fertilize at all? Well, there's a lot of nitrogen in chicken poop, so it's only providing a certain type of food. So I would still try to again, it's getting the plant the food that they need when they need it. Okay, so a chicken manure situation or any kind of manures tend to be higher in nitrogen in general, except for maybe horses don't digest their food very far, so that's a different thing altogether. But cow manure and chicken manure, llamas, any of the alpaca, whatever, that's all going to have a fair amount of nitrogen. So is it great to have as an early season boost? Oh yes. And again, you do want to let a lot of those manures sit for some time because you can do damage. We actually used to carry a chicken poop fertilizer thing in a bag that we had some that I tested first before we put them out for sale, and I actually had to hold the bags back for another season because they came in and they were I burned the crap out of things at my house. And thankfully it's me. I don't want that to be your situation. You see what I mean? So, did you have a question?
Oh, the tomato worm.
Yes.
How many, let's see, I've only been getting one on each plant.
Mm-hmm.
And are they laying eggs and they'll get another one? We have to keep watching for them?
No, not necessarily, but when they are on your plant, they're like voracious eaters, right? So they're going to do, yes.
Oh, my chili.
Yes, they're going to do a lot of damage in short order. So what I will say is if you start to see and they are hard to find sometimes, I do have spinosad, which is a spray that is safe to use on your plant material. That's an organic that is listed for tomato hornworm. It is so just know that most of your sprays, like this guy right here, is the spinosad in a liquid. Okay, this right here is there's a couple of different ones here. This guy, yeah. So this guy right here is permethrin. Okay, pyrethrin. Okay. This is not the organic one. This is the synthetic. This is typically a week before harvest. You can spray this. Okay, wash it off, obviously. This is the organic. This is spinosad. This is listed for everything but aphids. So couple things to keep in mind with organics. Now, I'm not necessarily talking about fertilizers. I'm talking about treatment. A rattlesnake is organic, right? Sure. So just because it's organic doesn't mean that you can drink it out of the bottle, right? So use it as it says to. There are, each of these labels open up so you can get all the directions that you need of how often to spray, what you can use it on, that sort of thing. This guy, you can spray it this morning and harvest your plant this afternoon. Okay, so a little bit different. I mean, I would still wash your fruit, vegetables. Yes, ma'am.
Do you recommend using a shade cloth when?
We get asked that question a lot. Personally, my tomatoes and peppers are out in blazing hot sun all day long. And I personally think that they need to get used to our sun, because the moment that you start to try to create that situation, 9 times out of 10, the wind blows it away. I mean, to me, it's probably more work than it is to just get the plants to be used to the situation that they're in and water them well. Okay? Yes, ma'am.
I've seen like some videos online of when it gets really hot, people will put terracotta pots in the soil. Is that something that's worth doing when it gets hot outside?
You mean for water?
Yeah.
We carry the Oyas. I'm not dissing the Oyas. I don't think it's something you should depend on. I think it's something that, like, oh my God, I'm going out of town for a week. I'm going to put an Oya in there, or, you know, or 3 days. But I would still ask your neighbor to come water, or if you don't have, you know, like, I just don't trust that we really get out of those what we should. And a lot of the Oyas that we have coming in, I mean, the biggest one is this big. So we're talking maybe a gallon of water. That's not going to last that long in our situation here. The other thing, I was going to grab a tomato real quick because I want to show you something that's really good to do with your tomatoes specifically. And I saw it this morning and I meant to grab it. It's one particular tomato because it's the perfect one. So I don't know if anybody here does any pruning on their tomatoes, but you should. If you can see this tomato, I'll kind of hold it up as best I can. You see all the little growth that's coming in under the underside? Okay, so we all know that we plant a tomato deep, correct, right? We plant it deep. So if you're getting a tomato like this, in my opinion, this would be a tomato that maybe you only take a little bit off the bottom and only plant it a little deep, because it's got all of this growth that's happening. I would cut this top right off. Bye. And let all of this stuff kind of get in and get a nice, big, bulky, instead of tall. I'm not saying that your tomatoes aren't eventually going to get tall, because it is. But what we're trying to do is create some fatter growth, yes. So, and I think a tomato like this is the perfect example. Not all of them are going to be like this. Some of them are a little bit more leggy, and you really do need to just take the bottom off and bury it halfway in the ground and call it good. But if you can get it in the ground and maybe take a look and go, oh, there's some new stuff coming up here, I think I'll just take the top off. And especially early season, if you're doing a wall of water and you've got a tomato that you've had in a wall of water for the last week, take a look at it. Open that wall of water up and really maybe consider pruning it, because now is a good time to get that girth on these. So, and it's good for the plant. Yes, ma'am.
I have 3 tomato plants planted in April sunlight. Every single one of them just burned up to a crisp. And I was watering them every single day. Do you think maybe I planted them too late in the season when it was already too hot? Or what would explain that they just fried?
Sometimes, I mean, part of gardening is failure. I mean, and you have to know that that's part of it. But I would also say that if they went to heck in a handbasket right away, 9 times out of 10 that's soil. Okay, because there's not enough there for them to take the moisture in, or maybe it wasn't amended well enough. you know, and they're not, and there's nothing good happening below ground. Maybe it's draining too fast. I mean, that's it. Things that go quickly can honestly, I mean, yes, it could be a water thing, you know, depending on how you water also. You know, you want to get your things like tomatoes to where you're only watering them a few days a week, if you can get them there. I mean, in the heat of summer, yeah, you're going to add some extra water. If you have things on drip irrigation, which is great, don't depend on your drip irrigation solely. Get out there and look at your plants, because when you go out and it's done and it's fried and you're wondering why I have my drip irrigation on, it should be fine, that's not usually enough. You know, it could be if you've got your irrigation set up correctly, but 9 times out of 10, we see it every day, every single day, 100 times a day, you don't have your irrigation set up correctly. And I don't want to pick on everybody, but that is 100% the case for us. We see it every single day, multiple times a day. So if you are getting brand new plants need a lot of water. But you should be able to get your tomatoes, before it gets hot, you should be able to get your tomatoes to about 3 days a week, and then maybe you're adding an extra day. And maybe if you're lucky enough that you're getting some production out of your plants even in the hotter season, then you might want to be watering them every day. A little, you know, I mean, tomatoes are full of water. Fruit is full of water. So if your fruit trees are not producing great fruit, you're not watering enough. Fruit is full of water. Those plants need water to help produce that fruit and keep that fruit healthy, okay? And tasting good. Yes, ma'am. I'll be right with you.
I'm thinking about using the wall waters this year.
Uh-huh.
When do you put yours out?
The last time that we used walls of water that was excellent, we started right around the 1st of May, or 1st of March. And you wanna fill. They're kind of there's a production to it. You know, you put them around a bucket, so because they have to stand upright. So the chambers, you have to fill every chamber, right? So we would set them in maybe with a couple of stakes too, because you're gonna have to pull the bucket out. So a couple of stakes, fill all the chambers, and let it sit for a week, because you're basically gaining solar energy to create warmth in the soil below, okay? So, and there are red ones, there are blue ones, doesn't matter. Supposedly this is supposed to be better, I don't care. They do the same thing. So, but that March, and we had full-on nice, beautiful tomatoes at Mother's Day. So it was worth every second of the time to do it. So, do you live here in the East Mountains?
Yeah, no, just down the street.
Yeah. So you could get on it, but get on it. You know what I mean? Because you're almost, yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Back to the tomatoes. Do you do the bottom trimming too?
When I plant, yes. Yep. You can pull off the, you know, usually there's some of these kind of almost started to go by leaves on the bottom, stems on the bottom. I just take those off when I plant deep.
So what you're doing is wanting to plant it deep, but you don't do any more trimming after that?
It depends. It depends on the plant. You know, like again, this plant is just a prime example of stuff that you could trim the top of this plant off and encourage a huge amount of low growth to come on this plant and really make a bulky plant before it's, yes, sir. Sorry, where did I take it off? So if I were looking at it like this, I would probably take off this whole top section, even down to here. See how it's got new growth right here? I would probably take off that whole top section, because it'll push more from where you cut anyway, but all of this other stuff will help push more. So you'll end up with a big girthy plant instead of just a tall, skinny, you know?
Yeah, that's last year they got beat with the heat. The year before was the wind.
Yeah, that's why I say if you're not going to use the wall of water, but you want to get an early start on some of the things, I mean, a quart tomato right now, all of these quarts that are back here, I would tell you right now, put it in a gallon pot when you get home, and put it outside even on a windy day. They need to get exposure. So if you're going to put it outside and let things feel whatever that day is going to bring, now I would be a little bit careful about days like yesterday. Right? So, you know, listen for the weather. If they say it's going to rain because of the time of year, know that there's hail in the forecast probably too. That's the best thing. So she's asking about a diseased plant and how long, the diseased tree, and how long or what she should do to treat soil. My opinion is leave it dormant. If you've got a problem there, let a sleeping dog lie for a while, and then you don't have to sit there and try to put some sort of ugly chemical in the soil to treat a problem. Okay? Yes, sir.
So freeze. It's maybe if it's only going to freeze for an hour, 30 minutes, is that enough to damage my apricot trees?
Oh, yes.
Well, at 30 degrees, no. 28, yes.
Yeah.
I sell apricots 1 in 5. They always flower in March, and it freezes 4 out of 5 times.
Right.
How far below soil do you need to plant tomatoes? If you are going to plant a tomato deep, which is one of the better things to do also, like I said, this plant is a little bit different example of planting for a tomato, but if we were to use this plant as an example of planting deep, then you would take off basically the entire lower half of this plant and plant this far into the ground, at least. You could even go up to here if you wanted to.
Because they grow roots out.
Because they grow roots out. So there's some options, and when you, yes, ma'am.
Question on planting. What plants to plant together or not?
The best thing to do is maybe not put your peppers and tomatoes together, because and just keep it simple for yourself that way, because they have the same problems. So you're encouraging the same problems to be in the same place. So if you can separate those, I mean, the best thing to do is rotate your garden. So your tomatoes are in one spot, your peppers are in another spot, cucurbits are in another spot, and rotate it. Every year rotate it so that on the third year, those tomatoes are in the same spot. You know what I mean? That's usually the best rule of thumb, but we don't all have that kind of space. Let's be honest, right? So the best thing to do is try to, at the very minimum, keep your tomatoes and peppers separate, because they get the same exact problems. Okay, so you want to not necessarily draw all of those problems into one spot in your garden. Did you have a question, sir?
I do. Is there a way to combat witch's broom?
Witch's broom?
One rose plant that has it that spread from my neighbor's yard.
What is it?
It's a fungus. So it's a predatory plant, basically. That's yes, there's some spray for it, but it's real aggressive. So in my opinion, maybe if you can pick it off, that's great. If it's covering the plant to the point where it's hard to see the plant anymore, honestly, start from scratch. And because can you use, like, what is it, or is it Consan 20 for witch's broom? Is it Consan 20? It is a parasitic weed. So I would be, if I can find, I might be able to fish through and find something, but I feel like you're kind of in a no man's land. And if there is something listed, it's going to be nasty stuff. So.
I didn't even know the thing. And my neighbor's like, oh, I think your plant has witch's broom. It killed like half my backyard. I'm like, oh.
Yeah.
Daughter.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am. Yes. Yep. You're going to pick it all. You're going to pick it all naked.
You can plant
Yep.
them sideways.
You can plant them sideways too. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
So, what causes tomato rot?
So usually, you know, the big idea is that it's a calcium issue. We also find that it's a inconsistent water issue. So if you're watering super heavy and then all of a sudden it goes a week and it's just all over the place, that can be problematic for the plant also and cause that same problem. So, yes, ma'am.
I got one of the guys at a nursery told me to get gypsum. And I got a piece of sheetrock. And used the gypsum out of the middle. And it ended the end rot.
Yeah, you can use gypsum. I probably wouldn't use sheetrock because it's been treated. So so I probably wouldn't go that route. But you could use gypsum, and that does help. Yes, ma'am.
I've always put crushed eggshells on the bottom. That's not enough calcium for.
It's very slow. Yeah, it's very slow to break down. So it's very slow for the plant to take it up. So Yeah. So this guy has the calcium in this is a little bit more quickly available. Okay. So, yeah. Yes, ma'am.
I went to go. I got some of the soil minter for raised beds, and I went to go start digging it in, and noticed I have a lot of kale and beets and onions that are already coming up. Can I just like work it in around them?
Yeah. Yeah, no, don't dig them all out. Just kind of, but you be a little bit. I mean, the beets and the onions, I'm not as worried about because they're going to keep coming up above the soil. But the kale, if it's don't smother the kale. It's very easy to smother young seedling kale. So if it's just coming up from seed or something like that, you don't want to be a little bit careful with that for sure. Yes, ma'am.
These plants look like they're ready to be put on a plate.
Yes, ma'am.
How long should you wait after planting them before harvesting?
I think a little bit of that is personal taste, right? So in my opinion, you know, this is a Swiss chard that these young things are the ones that you would find in like a spring mix at the grocery store. If you wait till they're a little bit bigger, you can use them like a wrap, you know, and wrap veggies or make a wrap of some kind, or stuff them like a grape leaf or something like that. So I think that's a little bit of a personal preference. And also when they get to be a lot bigger, they're a lot better cooked than necessarily raw. So again, that's your personal preference. And you know, if you're like, I'm gonna stick with the young ones, what I would tell you is if you're gonna stick with the young ones, you want a lot of them, because these rebound a little, this particularly rebounds a little bit slower. So if you're picking and pinching these young plants, you need kind of a collection to kind of play with, you know, but
the ladies were eating carrots out of the pots yesterday.
Yeah,
so you can, whenever you're
they
ready.
They were delicious.
You don't ruin your plant. But they were literally, we have carrots in there that had carrots, and they were pulling their plants.
Is there a way to keep the leafy greens from opening?
Not really.
In the early season, they do great, and then by the time.
Yep, they're cool season for a reason. Yep. So and like I said earlier, you can sometimes get really good with getting these stuffed underneath, or plant a tomato right next to it, so that when the tomato grows up, and you maybe limb the bottom of the tomato just a little bit, but when the tomato grows up, the tomato is actually producing some shade. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to eliminate the bolt, but if you can get after clipping the bolt as soon as you start to see it, that's always a good thing, because the bolt will also change the flavor of the greens. So you have to, yes. So you really want to get after it as soon as possible, or feed it to the chickens or whatever. Yes, ma'am.
We had a wonderful turnout of tomatoes last year, but my large tomatoes with like a nice variegated color didn't ever ripen to a red. Is there anything we can do about that?
Unfortunately, last year we had such a stretch of super hot that when the tomatoes started producing again in the fall, which always happens, by the way, that's nothing new. So, but when it started to produce again in the fall, it was kind of late. And I think that we all had a situation where we didn't necessarily get the most out of the tomatoes. And what I would tell you is, if you are looking for some of the larger varieties of tomatoes, I would strongly recommend that next year or now, get yourself walls of water, get your varieties that you really want that are those larger, like even if you're thinking of, what are those? Like German, like Mr. Stripey sometimes can also be a little bit larger, and you're talking about the striped tomatoes or colored tomatoes. But if you're looking at some of those larger varieties, start them in a wall of water early.
So what does the wall of water do?
It basically creates a greenhouse, okay?
Gives
So
you a month head start.
it gives you a month to a month and a half head start.
So it's warming the soil?
Yes, yes. And when you get this, guys, I mean, if you start your tomato in here and it's really young, it's going to be well below the size of this. By the time frost is out of our area, typically your tomato's coming out the top anyway, so you're just going to pull it off over the top. It will, giving that extra month is a game changer. It's a game changer. So, any other, yes, ma'am? What about them? Huh?
What's like, do you have any tips for
My personal opinion is strawberries don't belong in full sun in the afternoon. I think they need a lot of morning light. I think they need some shade in the afternoon. They need a ton of water, in my opinion. I consider them one of the highest water veggies that we have here.
I'll tell you, I've tried for 5 years and still don't have a strawberry bed. 5 years I've tried.
We tend to, we also tend to get to a point where we want the garden to be relatively self-sufficient. So where we've been trying these these strawberries, we probably just need to add more water in there so that it's getting more water each time the irrigation system goes on, because life happens, and but they do require a lot of water. Did you have another question?
Yeah, I can't grow cilantro for anything.
Cool season.
So fast.
Cool season.
Okay.
You can start cilantro seeds in February. Outside.
Okay.
Get your free plants.
Yep.
Get your free plants.
So the wall of water, like we would buy tomatoes and plant them in the ground right now.
You put the wall of water up. You put the wall of water up. Put some stakes in a 5-gallon bucket. Fill all the chambers of water and let that sit for about a week. And then you can plant your tomato. Pull the stakes so that the top of this thing will kind of come up and be a little greenhouse in there. And
the guy that created them, weird, because I'm like, if you're this smart, this is what you created. Physics create, when water is cooling, it creates heat. So it's more than just covering. It's creating heat.
Yes, and in the soil.
So he's driving by ponds, watching steam come off the ponds, going, I should harvest the energy. And he creates a wall of water. I'm like, that's brilliant. Seems like you should do more than create a wall of water with that kind of smarts.
So
it heats up.
Plant it out of the 5-gallon bucket into the raised bed.
Yeah. So the plant.
Right in the raised bed.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Put the wall of water around it in the raised bed.
Yeah. Put the wall of water up. You got to let the wall. The 5-gallon bucket comes from holding the thing up, because you can't fill all these chambers and have it stay up unless you've got something to hold it up. And we put 3 stakes in so that when we are ready, we can pull the bucket out, throw the tomato in, and then pull the stakes. And then the whole thing kind of closes and creates that little greenhouse. And as these things get hot during the day, the water gets warm during the day. As it cools at night, that energy creates warmth in the soil. So it helps keep the soil warm.
That's amazing.
It is amazing. It really is.
It really